You're listening to Nurture Your Zest. I'm your host, Ashleigh King, and I will introduce you to a wealth of interesting, fascinating individuals from all walks of life who will share their stories, how they've overcome challenges, and you will find out their top tips for success. Through this podcast, you can gain tips to grow and change your life and the way you see the world, and help you to nurture your zest. Hello and welcome to Nurture Your Zest. My name is Ashleigh King and I'm so excited because I have the wonderful Ammar Mirza with me today. We're going to have a brilliant chat and I'm just really going to get stuck into it. So it's so great to have you here today. How are you doing, Ammar?
Great. No, delighted to be here.
And you're looking super sharp. I love your outfit.
Thank you. I thought I'd make an effort and get dressed up especially.
I had a guest on the other day, Simon Bourne, who makes fabulous hand-dyed leather shoes.
He does, yeah.
And we were chatting about just men's fashion and, you know, how important it is to him. And actually, it's something I never really thought about since I'm not a man. But I was really just listening to how he expresses himself and the way he looks through his clothing. And I can see you do that too. So it's a really, really cool look.
Well, thank you. Thank you. I mean, interestingly, it's my armour is what it is.
Wow, that's an interesting way of looking at that. So can you tell us more about needing to wear armour?
Yeah, very happy to. So at school, everyone's in a uniform. Mm-hmm. So from a what you wear point of view, it's very much everyone's the same. And when I left school, in school, out of school, I wanted to fit in. Having been born and brought up here, being of a slightly different skin colour. And when I left school, I wanted to continue wearing a uniform of sort. Mm. And ever since, I've worn a suit. So I can remember, and I'm probably sharing some of my black and white day type of memories, going to places like Burton's or Topshop and buying one of their suits and wearing that with big lapels and sort of baggy pants and things like that. And I've always worn a suit, and it's interesting that certainly for work, but people don't recognize me on a weekend because I'm wearing casual. So it's really interesting.
I like that you have that ability to express yourself in different ways and different clothing, and I think it's nice sometimes to take off the armour. You know, you've got it to support you, but you also have the opportunity to take it off and share other parts of yourself with people who, are close to you, or family, or your friends who see you in a totally different way to all the other accolades that you wear. Yeah. So I would love to actually, when I was thinking about, gosh, how do I even begin to introduce you as a guest? You have so many hats or suits that you wear, you've got so many amazing projects that you're working on. One of the ones that stood out to me was the fact that you've been working with the military. So, I mean, could you share a little bit about that with us and what you've been doing?
Yeah, no, delighted to. It's an honour. So I am an Honorary Colonel of the 101 Regiment Royal Artillery. And my sort of exposure or experience of the army sort of harks back to when I was a teenager, 14, 15, I joined the cadets, and they were in Slateyford. And at the time, we lived in High Heaton. And for those of you who are unfamiliar, these are places, suburbs in Newcastle. And the number one bus is the number one bus in Newcastle, and it is that number for a couple of reasons. One, because it was the first bus, but it also the first bus route, and it's also the longest bus route. So I used to get this number one bus in my cadet uniform because I wanted to do something different. And at that time, I was the first sort of Asian ethnic person to be in the cadets at that time, and that was the Royal Artillery. And whilst it was a torrid journey getting there, because I'd be sat at the top of the bus, as any sort of 14, 15-year-old would be, I used to get lots of abuse because the number one bus goes through the most affluent and the most deprived areas in Newcastle. And I'd regularly end in an argument or whatever it was. But once I got to the cadets, it was a wonderful experience. It taught me a number of self-development, personal skills, discipline, getting somewhere on time, looking at your appearance, and ultimately led to me and my OCD of sort of cleanliness and things like that, which some might perceive as a negative, but for me it was a really positive. So it was a great experience, and ever since I've always been a huge advocate and supporter of our armed forces, and the North and the Northeast in particular is the single biggest contributor to the army. Lots of people grow up, join the army, and actually I would have loved to, but my late mum said, "No, you're not doing that, son." And I didn't. And then for the last 10 years, I've been a big cheerleader and advocate of the army, and have helped recruit a very large number of businesses and organisations to the Armed Forces Covenant, and was one of the first small organisations to be awarded an Armed Forces Covenant Gold employer, which is a huge recognition. And then as a consequence of that, I was asked, would you consider becoming an honorary colonel? It's an appointment by Our Majesty the Queen. So I've got this beautiful scroll that says, "Our beloved Ammar" on it. We would like you to appoint you as an honorary colonel. And it's the first time in the history of the Royal Artillery that in this particular regiment, that a non-military person has been appointed as an honorary colonel. So it's an amazing honour, genuinely humbling, to see all of these people who have devoted selflessly their lives to protecting us, and actually being prepared to give up their lives. And here am I, a Geordie Asian person who's been given this wonderful privilege of continuing to act as a cheerleader on their behalf.
It's really powerful to hear your journey of going through the bus, or going on the bus on that long journey regularly, going through all the parts of Newcastle. And, knowing what I know of you, and for anyone watching, they may know some things about you already, or some people might be meeting you for the first time, but your love for the Northeast and your love for people from all walks of life and different backgrounds, particularly social, class and economic backgrounds. The work you've done for the region, to help with economic development, things like the local enterprise partnerships you've set up, and been a part of those, steering committees, and the work you did as a David Goldman professor for Newcastle University Business School. I really value that because, I studied my MBA at the business school, and so we hold a very high honor for our Goldman professors. So it's lovely to see all these things that you've achieved, but also hearing, some of the thoughts that were going through your mind, as a kid on those buses, and the abuse you were experiencing, but also how you're giving back to the army now. For instance, when you look at the army now, or when you go and do talks, or when you recruit, do you get people saying to you, I'm inspired by you? Do you, when you were kind of looking around and felt like the only cadet who was in the territorial army or that type of thing, do you get people feeling inspired now? What kind of feedback are you hearing?
Yeah, it's a great question. And thank you ever so much, Ashleigh, for your kind and considerate words and sentiment as well. Equally, I'm a huge fan of you and all you do. I think it's delightful and wonderful for someone like you to sort of platform and showcase what we can do as a collective, as a community. So, heartfelt thank you, certainly from my behalf, for everything that you do. Coming back to your question on inspiring others, I certainly don't see it as that. What I do see, and recollecting childhood experiences, were lots of opportunities I simply didn't get, and support I never had. So I had to navigate the path myself with very limited or little sort of advice, support, reference, and such like. So I've always, initially growing up here, I just wanted to fit in. That's all I ever wanted to do. And it was so hard. And even now, there's times when I think to myself, gosh, I am where I am. I've done what I've done. And it's wonderful to have trailblazed in that way. But even then, we all still suffer from an element of doubt and self-doubt. Do I set out to inspire other people? Probably not. I'm delighted that they are. And the one thing that I have always maintained is, hopefully it comes across, is an element of groundedness. I am who I am. I'm very proud of who I am. We went from being the most affluent Asian family in Newcastle to, sadly, due to family challenges, being probably one of the most poorest, right? So I remember going to Rumbelows with my late father on Northumberland Street and buying one of the first video recorders. And for those of you who equally probably are unaware of video recorders, it was where films and things like that were shown and whatever else. But these were like piano key type of devices, archaic in this day and age. But going from that, where we owned all of the shops at the top of Pitt Street opposite St. James's Park, where we owned a number of properties and ran lots of markets, to mum being thrown out on the street and having to work 18-hour days on a sewing machine simply to feed us, was quite a significant experience. So coming from a broken family, coming from a single parent family, coming from abject poverty. I mean, gosh, at one point, mum was always so proud, and actually in Pakistan comes from a very affluent family, but was determined to make it here and continue doing what she'd done here. And as a consequence, that level of entrepreneurship, that sort of determination, undoubtedly is the biggest influence of my life. But she done it very reservedly. She done it, not through any aspect or element of seeking gratitude or seeking any reward. And don't get me wrong, I am absolutely privileged and honored, and it's an absolute, sort of delight to have been recognized in all of the ways that I have. And if anything, that sort of pushes you on. It sort of, gives you that motivation. So motivation requires motive. So those accolades and recognition is great, but that's never why I've done it. I've done it to set out to A, prove to myself I can, and B, more importantly, I've given away 50% of my life to help others because I never had that support.
Wow, it's fascinating to hear what you've said and what you've shared there, and what a journey, with your parents, and hearing of your mom and the way that she supported your family, the way that she had to just get on with it, and as you say, not looking for gratitude because she may not have got that anywhere, but actually just soldier through in a way, and just be the best parent she could be, coping with some really difficult circumstances. I mean, that is, I love hearing how you speak of her and how much you clearly love her. I know you said your late mom, so she sounds like a fabulous woman, and I'm really, I'm thinking, listening to that story, because that's as part of your story I haven't heard before, and I'm thinking, when we lived in South Africa, at one point we came into some money and we had a mansion and it was beautiful, and we had a gorgeous, house, and everything was brand new, all the furniture, and I had amazing parties with my friends and all kinds of things. but very quickly we were in another situation where we had this beautiful mansion, but we had no food in the cupboards. And it was just a change in circumstance. But one of the things that I remember is how quickly money can come and how quickly it can go. And so I believe that there's always more money that can be made. And actually, that's one of the reasons why I believe in collaboration and community so much, because I think it's important to share your resources. However, what I have also discovered is that, the happiest times of my life have often been when I've had nothing, because I've appreciated everything around me so much. So hearing your story of, watching your mom and seeing the way she's worked and how it inspired you in your own entrepreneurial journey is really powerful. But it makes sense to me now why family and communities and giving back is so important. I know, as you said, you don't set out to inspire, but you were recognised, by Her Royal Majesty, the Queen, or I'm not sure of the correct protocol or terms. I'm sure you are, but I mean, you were recognised in that way, which is amazing. And how was that experience of being recognised as a commander of the British Empire?
So it was incredible elation and immense sadness when I was recognised, because the very fact my late mother, who actually, Ashleigh, I think about every single day. There isn't a day that goes by where there isn't a reference. And even now, after sort of 11 years of her passing, she's still vividly in my thoughts and memories every single day. And how was it? Gosh, a tremendous experience. It's hard to convey, particularly when, if you think about it, coming from going back to who I am and where I've come from. I was born in Benwell, right? It was community driven. I was quite unique. At that time, there was very little or limited ethnic communities in the area. So, growing up there, and then, Mum had worked and sort of battled her way, and we moved to High Heaton, where I then went to school. And, it was, certainly we weren't affluent, but we certainly weren't looking for food, which we were earlier on. And we'd moved from having an outside toilet, which was a really interesting experience, right? And getting bathed in literally either the sink or a tin bath. And this was the sort of early 80s, right? As in, this isn't like sort of black and white days. It's interesting. Anyway, so going through all of those experiences, getting a bit lost, in between, being uncertain of who I was, what I should be, because I was just trying to fit in. It was, and some of those experiences were horrible upon reflection, but they shaped and informed me. But I've always been Geordie first and foremost, right? I was born on the banks of the Tyne. So we're sort of really proud, passionate, positive people. And that's what I've always been. And so getting a phone call, because what actually happened, and it's a really interesting story, is what's meant to happen is you're meant to receive something in the post from the Cabinet Office, and you are then meant to respond to it, because the thing that you receive in the post is, the Prime Minister's minded to put you forward for this accolade. And I remember being sat at the Beacon talking to a friend in the cafe when I got this call, and I answered the call, and it was such and such from the Cabinet Office, and they said, "Is that Ammar Mirza?" And I'm going, "Oh yes, yeah. We sent you some correspondence, and we just need to know whether you're happy to accept this honour, and you've been sort of put forward for a commander of the British Empire." And I'm slightly embarrassed to say, at that time, I'd never heard of what a commander of the British Empire was, or even that accolade. And my response was quite simple: yes, of course, yeah, I'd be delighted to, and then sort of hung up, and then called them back and said, can I just double check a few things, please, because it was one of those things. And then the house, the property where they'd sent the letter, I still owned. It was rented out, and I remember ringing up the tenants and saying, oh, there was some post. Oh, yes, we know exactly what that was, because it was a grand letter. So I went and collected this grand letter. An incredible experience. So being the youngest, first British-born Asian in the Northeast to be appointed a CBE, I love that. As in, and of course it's for me, and it'd be remiss of me to say it's not for me, but actually it's for everyone out there, because it just demonstrates it doesn't matter who you are, where you come from, what you've done, you too can potentially achieve and be recognised. And that's probably the key drivers for me, is to sort of break down barriers, sort of open up doors, and simply encourage other people to do more and better. I get incredible joy and happiness of seeing other people succeed. I love that. That's what drives me. That's the most thing that gets me out of bed, is seeing other people happy. And I suppose I wanted to see other people happy to fit in, but then when I fitted in, I was like, that buzz was there, that became contagious. It's something addictive, that the joy that you get.
It's beautiful hearing you share that and looking back at that. And also, there was a time when I didn't know what those accolades meant either. And so I think sometimes, depending on your background and how you've grown up and what you've been around, just to know about certain protocols or positions or ways the world works, it can take a little bit of learning anyway, if you know what I mean. I love hearing about that, and I love that you were recognised in that way, and it's a tremendous honour, I think, to be one of the youngest ever, Asian born in the UK, born in the Northeast, and to have that honour, that's brilliant, and it's trailblazing for others in the region. So you do a lot of work in the region, and one of the things you did do is run for the North of the Tyne mayor in the mayoral campaign, and I was really interested in that campaign and how it went and just what I observed online on social media. And I wanted to ask you about that experience, because from the outside looking in, one of the things that I was really frustrated by is there are some brilliant candidates who were up for that in the region, and I liked different people for different reasons. And one of the things I was most frustrated by is the way that certain people were arguing online or actually I guess throwing dirt at each other. Perhaps that's part of politics that you have to go through. But I was just curious about your journey, in that campaign, your motives for doing it, but also how you felt during it.
Yeah, thank you. It was like all of my experiences, I describe and define them as great experiences. They may not be good and they may not be bad, or they may be one or other, but I've learned quite a lot from all of my experiences. So I love getting out of my comfort zone, right? Do I? Was that an accurate statement? Anyway, I get out of my comfort zone quite regularly and enjoy that experience. I probably may not enjoy getting out of my comfort zone, if that makes sense. So being a very proud Geordie, I seen that as a unique opportunity to represent everyone. And that's quite a significant statement to make. And the reason why I make it, Ashleigh, is that because of all of my experiences, because of everything that I've done, I have connected with literally every single part of the community, right? And every single sector. So I was, chair of governors of a primary school where I was a governor for 16 years. I've seen a generation of third, fourth, unemployed, deprived young people grow up in Walker, and we've worked tirelessly, and the teachers done an incredible job to sort of encourage them to realize their ambitions and raise their aspirations. So education, is a really big deal, and sadly, young people in particular, and I'm no different. When your parents are going, get educated, it's the most important thing, right? It's, oh, what do you know? Is the thing. And then when you become a parent and when you get older, you go, oh my gosh, how I wish I'd listened to my parents and recognized the importance of education. So education, big deal, really big deal. But education needs some sort of modernization. It needs some sort of relevance to people's lives and livelihoods. And that's why we set up a charity several years ago to introduce enterprise skills to primary age pupils. So there was those experiences. There was the broader, wider experiences of having set up Asian Business Connections, the first not-for-profit social enterprise that supported and prioritized Asian community, right? So had that reference. I had then sort of devoted a significant amount of time to working with the local authorities as a private sector representative. So whether that was the local enterprise partnership, where I chair the business growth board and I am the SME representative, through to in the 2000s, where I'd worked with Newcastle City Council on their innovation local strategic partnership and private sector and property. So I really had a very rounded understanding and appreciation of pretty much a lot of the challenges. I wouldn't say all of the challenges, because that would be quite wrong, but all of the challenges. But more importantly, the opportunities, right? Because all too often, the narrative we get here in the Northeast, and it started to change, and it's wonderful to see that, but all we've ever had is local politicians primarily stood on a pedestal telling us how rubbish everything is and how poor we are and we're the worst threat in the world and all of that. Yet when you look around, there's so many people just, making a difference. There's so many people sort of, climbing out of wherever they are to put their head above the parapet and just sort of determined to support themselves in the community. We've got so much to shout about. Gosh, the Industrial Revolution started here. We created light. We dug coal. We shipped everything here. And all of that is in our blood. But all too often we fail to recognize and appreciate that. So here was an opportunity I saw to represent the community meaningfully, with an impact, but represent all of the community. And interestingly, I had been approached by a couple of political parties asking, would I consider sort of getting involved? And upon reflection, I decided that what we needed, and this was purely my decision, what we needed was some independence, right? Someone who would stand up for our Northeast, someone who'd be a cheerleader, be an advocate on a regional, national and global scale. And that person was me, right? And I wanted to do it as an independent. I didn't want to get involved in party politics. And, last few years have demonstrated what happens when you do get involved in party politics. You get slightly distracted in what you should be doing, which is supporting the people of the United Kingdom. So I was determined to do something positive, but very much in a collaborative way, right? So it was never, and certainly, my intent wasn't, it's the Ammar show. It was, let's bring everybody together, right? That level of independence can do that. And it was wonderful. So I threw my hat in the ring. I wanted to concentrate on those things that I thought would make the biggest difference, including things like aspiration and ambition, helping support young people. And, my campaign was primary, so young people, to prosperity, because I believed that everybody deserves the chance to prosper. And we should create an environment where everybody can prosper. And we collaborate and we bring everybody together. So, it was a fantastic experience. Then when I put my hat in the ring, realized, going back to that point you made around, maybe it's politics, mudslinging, whatever it is, all of a sudden I was, front page news, maybe not front page, but anyway, I think it was page 10, 11, because I wasn't, obviously that important. But anyway, I was in the papers and I started getting lots of abuse, racist abuse, personal abuse. And I live a relatively private, I know it sounds sort of contradictory, but my personal life, my children, my wife, they encouraged, I love them, but I live in a bubble. So I go home, and the point that you were making about what I wear, I actually, you'll see me in a holy T-shirt, right? And that's not godly. It's got holes in it, right? Is the point. So you'll see me in a holy T-shirt. I'll be wearing shorts and some sort of slippers that are probably, Peppa Pig, Daddy Pig type slippers. That, it's a horrible sight if you were to visualize it. But I'm comfortable like that. So my home and private life was starting to get invaded, and children became a target and things like that. So I just thought, it's not me. I don't want to do this. My reasons behind doing it, and I'm very thick-skinned. I've I was a rhino growing up, and that remains skin there. But I'm very sensitive and protective of those around me, and they are so important to me. In every sense. So all of a sudden, what I didn't want to do was sort of, people then looking at the kids and then my wife and then friends and things like that. So I decided to withdraw.
Mm. Wow. I mean, there's so much I want to ask you there. I'm really conscious of the time, but could you share just very quickly how that felt for you, coping with that withdrawal, and did you grieve for that time, or did you have a transition time after that?
Yeah, it was interesting, right? Because and it's a great question. So when I had thrown my hat in the ring, I had a lot of people supporting me, and that was wonderful. The amount of encouragement, the amount of well wishes, the amount of sort of just general, sort of strangers going, Ammar, I've read what you said you're going to do, and I believe you can do it. And that was the thing, right? My political broadcast wasn't done on the back of I need to tell people what they want to hear. It was thought through. It was sort of spent years of experiences, consultative type of approaches. So I was particularly upset and disappointed that I felt as if I was letting certain people down, right? Because they'd put their faith in me. So that was hard, really, really hard. And then on an aside, I've experienced racism. I still experience it today. As in, believe it or not, what people describe as unconscious bias is actually very conscious bias, but that's just people's views, right? They've been influenced by these views. So sadly, they still see an Asian person there, and he shouldn't be sat where he's sat. And, going back to the amount of times that people, I'll wear my CBE and they'll go, oh, what's that? Oh, really? Did you get that? Like, not like, oh, great, you got that. As in, so it was really sad to still see that when my intent and intention was always, this is for the Northeast. And even despite that, I then realized I can still continue to do good, Ash. So it was, and I've continued to do that. That would have been a very, it was a scarring exercise, sort of experience, and it was really hard to get over. But one of the things that we are is very resilient, right, here in the Northeast. We're great people and we just get on without any fuss, so to speak. So I've continued since then to devote 50% of my time. People don't believe how much I volunteer, and people regularly go, "Oh, well, I don't know how you fit it all in." When you enjoy what you do what you enjoy, but you do it because of the impact it has, you just make the time.
Absolutely. Yeah, I'm really inspired by what you've said there, and I know we've spoken offline about this a great deal. I had a similar experience that I won't go into, but doing something for the region that I found the reaction at times, sometimes the things we do, our intentions aren't always the way they're received. And sometimes when you challenge the status quo or try things that are different or unusual, it's not always the journey you expected. However, what I've come to find is that sometimes it's an initiation for the next thing, so that's something that has helped me to get through that. I did want to say, I'm going to ask you one last question because it's my favorite question to ask all guests. But before I do that, I did want to say a big thank you actually to you personally in terms of collaboration, which you've talked about a lot in community. There was a time when I was the executive producer of TEDx Newcastle University. And that was such a brilliant opportunity, and I really enjoyed it. And you were one of our speakers on the day, talking about the importance of our students and our communities and collaboration. And we collaborated so much with the business community. But particularly, I wanted to thank you for your time that you donated for me to, have the opportunity to speak on Spice FM. That was great, reach other audiences that I wouldn't normally. And I think there really is value in collaboration. I always like to say collaboration over competition, some people say people over profit. Or profit over people. I like to say profit with purpose, So I wanted to really thank you from the bottom of my heart for that, but also I want to ask my favorite question. So what is your number one way to nurture your zest?
Gosh, great question. Thank you ever so much, Ashleigh, for everything that you do as well. And I mean that. And I'm so sorry that we occasionally go through very rare experiences of sort of people generally, right, not appreciating or recognizing or understanding even the intent behind what we do and why we're trying to do it. And it was beautiful for you to lead such a significant event, TEDx. Gosh, who doesn't know and who wouldn't want to get involved in that? So, well done and congratulations. It was incredible. And everything that you continue to do, including things like this. Long may you prosper. I was nearly going to turn into a Star Trek, and was it live long and prosper?
But I can never remember the way that you meant to do the hand. Anyway, I get the message.
So let's live long and prosper. So my zest, the buzz of seeing other people succeed, right? Motivation requires a motive. And that is my motive. So when I see despair and helplessness and hopelessness, my number one action and reaction to that is to try and break through that noise and that nonsense, so to speak, and to help people and just encourage people, because actually we all know what we know about ourselves, and no one knows us better than ourselves. So seeing people sort of take a step and then another step and then another step and then start to run. So focus is key. Routine's a big deal, and gift yourself time is the most important thing. But yeah, seeing other people, seeing you has really given me immense zest and what you do. So well done.
Thank you. Thanks so much for coming on the show today.
Pleasure.
You've been listening to Nurture Your Zest. You can find us online on Facebook, Twitter, Instagram and LinkedIn at Nurture Your Zest. If you've liked today, please subscribe. You can also leave us a review if you're feeling extra kind. Today's podcast has been made available through the kind sponsorship of TL Multimedia and That Branding Company. We look forward to catching up with you again soon as you learn to nurture your zest.